Every great movie has a villain. The evil genius, the tyrant, the dictator, the evil laugh. And sometimes, the villain wins. Not because the hero failed, but because the hero was the villain the entire time. And I'm not talking about shows like Breaking Bad, Attack on Titan, or Death Note, where the writers explicitly tell us the main character is actually evil. Those characters know what they are. They made a choice and leaned into it. I'm talking about something far more insidious. Characters who are still presented to us as the good guys, on a journey of growth, redemption, and doing the right thing, even when their decisions destroy lives, cities, friendships, and occasionally the entire multiverse. And before the comment section assembles like the Avengers to defend their favorite characters, this isn't about saying these characters are evil. Stories often frame actions as heroic simply because the protagonist is the one doing them. But shift the perspective and think about their actions for more than 5 seconds, you'd realize you can be the hero of your own story and the villain in someone else's simultaneously. So today we're analyzing a few characters who fit the bill. We're starting small, deliberately, because sometimes the most revealing villains aren't the ones with world-ending plans. Sometimes they're just the guy who gets away with everything and smiles about it. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is a beloved classic. Funny, charming, and at its center is Ferris. Magnetic, effortlessly cool. The kind of person everything just works out for. But take off the nostalgia goggles and look at his best friend, Cameron. Cameron Fry is anxious, deeply unhappy, and living under the psychological weight of a cold, emotionally absent father. He is, by any honest reading of the film, the character who actually needs help. Ferris knows all of this, and what does our hero do with that knowledge? He bullies Cameron out of bed, forces him to steal his dad's priceless Ferrari, emotionally manipulates him all day, and then when Cameron accidentally destroys the car, he leaves Cameron to take the catastrophic fall while Ferris safely sneaks back into his warm bed. He engineers an entire day that is ostensibly about Cameron confronting his issues, but is actually about Ferris having a great time, using Cameron's emotional crisis as a plot device for his own adventure. And it's framed as friendship, as Ferris helping Cameron find himself. And by the end, Cameron does have a breakthrough. He decides to stand up to his father. But the real question is, did Cameron get to choose that journey? Or did Ferris choose it for him because it made for a better day? Ferris Bueller is not exactly a villain in the dramatic sense. He is simply a character who has never once faced a consequence in his life. The film presents this as charming, and it is charming. But charm is often the thing we assign to people who take from others without asking. Ferris isn't the only beloved character whose actions become questionable under scrutiny. Because when you look closely, even Glinda starts looking suspicious. The Wizard of Oz is one of the most beloved films in cinema history, and at its heart is a simple story. A girl wants to go home, and the good witch helps her get there. Glinda floats down in a beautiful pink bubble, smiles brightly, and helps little old Dorothy navigate the magical land of Oz. Good witch, right? It's literally in the name. Wrong. Let's look at what Glinda actually does in this film. And more importantly, what she doesn't do, and precisely when she chooses not to do it. Dorothy arrives in Oz. Her house has landed on the Wicked Witch of the East, killing her. Glinda immediately strips the body of its magical ruby slippers and slaps them onto a 12-year-old girl, putting a massive target on Dorothy's back. The Wicked Witch of the West shows up, furious, and wants them back. Glinda intervenes and sends her off to see the wizard. Now, why send her to the wizard at all? Because we find out at the very end of the film, Dorothy had the power to go home the entire time. The ruby slippers, which Glinda gave her, could take her home from the moment she put them on. Glinda knew this, and she didn't tell her. Instead, Glinda sends a frightened child on a dangerous journey through a hostile magical land, allows her to be terrorized by flying monkeys, imprisoned by a witch, and nearly killed multiple times before finally revealing at the very end that none of it was necessary. Her stated reason?
Then why didn't you tell her before?
Because she wouldn't have believed me. She had to learn it for herself.
Right.
Let's be very clear about what that means. Glinda decided, unilaterally, that Dorothy's personal growth journey was more important than Dorothy's safety. And you know why? Because she wanted Dorothy to walk across the country and assassinate the Wicked Witch of the West, Glinda's only remaining political rival, while still maintaining her faux innocent persona to the Munchkins.
Coincidence? I think not!
Glinda isn't a good witch. She's an organized crime boss who used a lost child as a hitman. The bubble, the pink dress, the crown, all of it is aestheticized power, dressed up so prettily that we never stop to ask whose interests it's actually serving. Glinda manipulates through omission, through silence, through the careful management of what other people are allowed to know. But no hero in modern superhero movies has a more controversial moral decision than Steve Rogers in... And I need you to hear me out on this one. Civil War is presented as a story about a genuine ideological conflict. Tony Stark believes the Avengers need oversight. Steve Rogers believes oversight compromises their ability to act. Two reasonable positions, two reasonable men. That's the movie we're supposed to be watching. Except when you look at Steve Rogers' actual behavior throughout this film, not his ideology, his behavior, the picture gets significantly more complicated. Let's start with the Sokovia Accords. Steve's concern that government oversight could be politicized is legitimate. General Ross is not someone you should hand unchecked authority to. His track record is a disaster, and the film knows it. But here's what Steve misses. The Avengers have all the leverage in this negotiation. They are the most powerful fighting force on the planet. No government is successfully containing them if they decide to walk. They could have sat at that table, pushed back hard, and renegotiated terms that address their actual concerns. They had every card. Steve doesn't try that. He positions himself as the principled holdout and treats the Accords as the enemy rather than a starting point for dialogue. Then there's his man crush, Bucky. And this is where Steve's judgment doesn't just slip, it collapses entirely. Steve makes decision after decision throughout Civil War that prioritizes Bucky's safety above everyone else's, above the functioning of his own team. He breaks Bucky out of custody. He fights his colleagues to defend one man. Bucky killed Tony Stark's parents, and Steve knew. He knew. The man who stands for truth and accountability withheld the murder of his friend's parents from him because it was inconvenient. He broke the team up, which ironically leaves the world less protected. He went rogue, and his resolution was a letter so condescending it should come with a participation trophy. The answer to bad oversight is not no oversight, it's better oversight. And Steve never even tried. Steve Rogers is not wrong about his values, but he is catastrophically wrong about his methods. And that's his biggest flaw. The certainty that his judgment supersedes everyone else's. Now, imagine a character who takes that same certainty and operates on it with decades of carefully constructed wisdom, warmth, and misdirection. Dumbledore is perhaps the most beloved mentor figure in modern fiction, asides Master Roshi, of course. Wise, warm, occasionally cryptic in that way that feels profound until you realize he just didn't answer the question. Always offering a lemon drop and twinkling in his eyes. A man who always seems to know exactly what he's doing. Which is precisely the problem. Because when you look at what Dumbledore actually knows, and what he chooses to do with that knowledge, the twinkling eyes become considerably less charming. Dumbledore knows, from the moment Harry Potter arrives at Hogwarts, that Harry will likely have to die. He understands the Horcrux situation. Dumbledore raises Harry, deliberately and methodically. He cultivates Harry's loyalty, his willingness to die for others. It's referred to, in one of the most quietly devastating lines, as raising him like a pig for slaughter. Plus, he is fully aware that Harry is being severely abused by the Dursleys, and Dumbledore just leaves him there. Beyond Harry, Dumbledore's entire approach involves using people as pieces in a game they don't even know they're playing. Snape, the Order, the students of Hogwarts, who are consistently placed in mortal danger at a school that, by any reasonable assessment, should have been shut down after its third catastrophic incident. But the genius of Dumbledore, and the thing that makes him so instructive for this conversation, is that his methods work. Voldemort is defeated. Harry survives. The good guys win. And the narrative uses that outcome to retroactively justify everything Dumbledore did to get there. It all worked, so it was all fine. But "it worked" has never been a moral argument. It's a results argument. And we should be very suspicious of wise old men who tell us the ends justify the means, especially when they're the ones deciding what the ends are. He and Glinda, by the way, would get along really well. Same playbook. Dumbledore, Glinda, and Steve Rogers all share one thing. They operate within stories where there is a clear antagonist to point at. A Voldemort, a Wicked Witch, a Baron Zemo. The presence of a genuine threat gives their compromise methods a moral shield. But what about a character whose righteous fury has no such shield? What about when the hero's catastrophic decisions aren't made in service of defeating evil, but simply for their own comfort? Welcome to Carol's world. Pluribus doesn't get nearly enough conversation in media analysis spaces, which is exactly why it belongs here. In sci-fi, we love the last human fighting the system trope, and in this show, humanity has largely been absorbed into a hive mind, a collective consciousness. And while that sounds dystopian on paper, the world it created is, by almost every measurable metric, functioning better. Enter Carol, one of the last remaining humans outside the hive mind. And Carol wants things back the way they were. On the surface, Carol is positioned as our protagonist. She represents individual freedom, autonomy, the human spirit. We're supposed to root for her, but let's critically examine what that hive mind actually achieved. By connecting everyone, they eliminated war, they eliminated hunger, poverty, murder, discrimination, internet fandoms. They essentially created a peaceful utopia. And Carol decides, nah, the vibes are off. And to fulfill her own selfish desire for individuality, she fights to return the world to how it was before. The world where people had individual freedom, and also used that freedom to murder each other, discriminate against each other, and wage wars over land and ideology. The story gives her the hero's journey framing, the lone individual against the collective, fighting for what makes us human. It's a compelling frame. It's also a frame that conveniently avoids asking, at what cost to everyone else? But the thing is, if Carol truly couldn't exist in this new world, she had options. She could remove herself from the equation. She didn't have to drag billions of people back into suffering to solve her personal existential crisis. Believe it or not, this isn't the first time this type of situation has presented itself, as DC gave us the exact same philosophical nightmare, except their hero wears a toilet bowl on his head. Peacemaker's entire brand is that he loves peace so much, he doesn't care how many men, women, and children he has to kill to get it, which is already a philosophical red flag. At the end of Season 1, we get a massive twist. The alien butterflies he's been hunting aren't trying to destroy Earth, they are trying to save it. They realize humanity is going to destroy itself through climate change and war, so they step in to do exactly what Peacemaker claims to want: achieve actual, lasting peace. He must choose. Let the butterflies continue controlling humanity, or stop them. And Peacemaker chooses to kill their leader. Now, if the butterflies were right, Peacemaker may have just removed the only system capable of preventing humanity's collapse. But the difference between him and Carol is, you could argue that his is a valid philosophical position since the aliens essentially replace humans. So he chose autonomy over imposed peace. The right to fail on your own terms. And that I can stand behind. But sometimes the villainy is carried out by someone so obviously destined to be the hero that the story around her simply refuses to hold her accountable. Ladies and gentlemen, Riri Williams is a genius. The show wants you to know this. MIT at 15. Builds a functioning Iron Man suit in her dorm room. Reverse-engineered vibranium detection technology that nearly started an international war, but we're not here to relitigate Wakanda forever. We're here for the Disney Plus series. Because the series, if you watch it honestly, is not really a story about a hero becoming great. It is a story about an extraordinarily gifted person making a series of decisions so catastrophically ill-considered that by the end of it, you have to wonder whether the show is aware of what it's actually showing you. Let's start with the single most indefensible decision Riri Williams makes in the entire series. And given the competition, that is a high bar. Riri, back in Chicago and caught up in the supernatural escalation surrounding the Hood, willingly aligns herself with a street gang called the Vipers. A character who is being set up as the next generation of Marvel's heroes decides that the most sensible path forward involves partnering with criminals who are actively robbing and harming people in the same community she claims to be protecting. By bringing herself into the orbit of the Vipers and legitimizing their operation with her presence and her armor, Riri amplifies their reach and emboldens their activity. People get hurt. Members of her own community, people who had nothing to do with the Hood, people she loves are also put in danger by information she chose to withhold. And the threat she is fighting grows more dangerous at every turn, partly because her interventions, unprepared and under-resourced, feed the escalation rather than contain it. The show acknowledges none of this as Riri's responsibility. Every consequence is framed as something that happened to her rather than something that happened because of her. And she gets a full series, leaves a trail of damage across her own neighborhood, and comes out the other side essentially unchanged. It's sad, really. Every character we've looked at so far has been making choices that hurt other people, but they knew what they were choosing. They saw the situation, weighed it, and decided. Imagine a character who causes catastrophic harm not through a deliberate choice, but simply because they couldn't stop themselves from wanting to fix everything. And I want to be clear before we get into this. Peter Parker is the most genuinely well-meaning character on this entire list. Basically the gold standard of superhero morality. He is just a kid trying to do right by everyone, which is exactly what makes what happens in No Way Home so quietly devastating. Because good intentions are not a moral defense. And Peter Parker is the purest proof of that. Let's rewind literally a few weeks in the MCU timeline. Peter's secret identity gets exposed by Mysterio. The fallout is enormous. His life and the lives of everyone around him collapses. So Peter goes to Doctor Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, and asks him to cast a spell to make the entire world forget Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Strange starts casting it. Peter keeps interrupting to add exceptions. Not MJ, not Ned, not Happy, and in doing so, fractures the spell so badly that it begins pulling in variants from across the multiverse. Villains, multiple Spider-Men, chaos. Now, Peter says he wants to cure the villains first before sending them back. But the thing is, Peter's entire character arc in Far From Home was learning not to blindly trust people after Mysterio completely played him. So having just learned this incredibly painful lesson, what does Peter do? He blindly trusts a bunch of psychotic multiverse villains, he locks Doctor Strange, the guy trying to protect reality in the mirror dimension, brings the villains to Happy Hogan's condo, and indirectly causes the death of Aunt May. The film frames Aunt May's death as the tragedy that hardens Peter into the Spider-Man he needs to become. But here's where it gets truly deep. At the end of the film, Strange casts the final spell. Everyone in the world forgets Peter Parker exists. We're meant to feel the heartbreaking sacrifice. Except, think carefully about what that spell actually does. It doesn't just make people forget Tom Holland's Peter Parker. The spell makes them forget Peter Parker. The concept, the name, across the multiverse, meaning Peter just erased the relationships, the character building, and the memories of every Peter Parker across the entire multiverse. Tobey Maguire's MJ doesn't know him. Andrew Garfield's Aunt May has no idea who her nephew is. Years of relationships, personal growth, entire support networks, everything that made them who they are. All gone. J. Jonah Jameson may have been right, ladies and gentlemen.
A vigilante, a public menace.
And the interesting part is, the spell erased him, yet he will never understand what the multiverse lost because of his choices. He will go on being Spider-Man, being good, trying his best, completely unaware that he is the villain in someone else's story. Stories love simple morality. Hero good, villain bad. But reality and great storytelling is much more nuanced than that. Heroes aren't defined by intentions, they're defined by consequences. And sometimes the person saving the day is also the reason the problem exists. So why don't we view these characters as outright bad? Because of empathy. As an audience, if we spend 2 hours inside a character's perspective, we will justify almost anything they do. We forgive Peter Parker for breaking the multiverse because we saw him crying over his aunt. We forgive Steve for tearing apart the Avengers because we know how much he loves Bucky. These movies accidentally reveal a massive truth about human nature. We are all the hero of our own story. Even when our actions are actively ruining someone else's life, as long as we feel our intentions are good, we will never see ourselves as the villain. And maybe that's worth thinking about. So yeah, that's all for now. If you've got a hero you think belongs on this list, let me know. We might have to do a part 2.
Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.